Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I'll call into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees on February 1st, beginning at 7:04 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for coming out with us this evening. As per usual, we'd like to start our meeting with our opening ceremony. With that, am I still? It disappeared. Huh. Oh, no, there we go. I'm back. New technology, as I said earlier. Well, I expect hiccups. Oh, Mr. Chapa, can you make it? Come on. Everybody, Justin Chapa. Just a quick moment of personal privilege. We have two birthdays in the house tonight. Miss Leslie Johnston in the back of the room. And Trustee Kristen Hudson as well. And with that, would you please join Ms. Hudson in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. And if you would also take this time to silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruptions to those around you. And if you would join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. All right. The first item on our agenda this evening is under program and presentation, student performance by the Districtwide Junior High School Orchestra, if you couldn't guess. Ms. Johnson.
The AISD has a rich and successful orchestral tradition. Our groups have represented the district from San Antonio as TMEA Honor Orchestras at the Texas Music Educators Association Convention to New York's Carnegie Hall. This evening, we will be treated to a district-wide junior high school orchestra whose members have recently been recognized as all-region orchestra members by TMEA. This year, there are approximately twice as many students from the district who are named to this all-region orchestra. They will be performing Afterburn by Ball Mages.
That was fantastic. My gosh, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You guys were incredible. If we had our choice, we would just listen to you for the next hour or two. Fantastic. And moms and dads and caregivers out there, thank you for supporting your kids. Fantastic fine arts. And to all those junior high orchestra directors, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. Oh, thank you so much. That was powerful. Mr. Stringer, Mr. Wynn, thank you guys also. Wonderful stuff. Wow. All right. Okay. That was really impressive. And with that, sorry, Principal Oric, you have to follow that. Can you do it? So next up on our agenda is the Student of the Month. Principal Christy Oric from Newcomer Center. Come on down.
Good evening, Dr. Cavazos, President Reich, School Board. I bring to you today Bushra, one of our Newcomer Center students who's been in the country for 10 months, not with Newcomer, but in the country. Bushra came to us last year, a quiet, introspective young lady, but what a difference one summer has made. She has simply opened up, blossoming into a go-getter, always responsible, respectful, relentlessly kind. She also became very assertive concerning her education. Bushra is a sponge, absorbing everything, continually seeking clarification of all things academic, and a person who thinks deeply about issues and questions. But she also demonstrated an abiding concern for other students who struggle. She's taken an initiative to work one-to-one with these students and ensure that they catch up with their classwork and they're successful, and find subtle ways to complement them in their work and their efforts. Bushra is that rare student who expresses appreciation for the time and effort her teachers put into her education. It's a cliche, but she is a genuine thirst for knowledge. One faculty member told us that his grandfather remarked about his daughter being a friend to those who had no friend. And this is Bushra Abu Mulawo. She is a friend to those who don't have one, and she makes sure everyone's successful on our campus. I present to you Bushra.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for selecting me. This is my brother Bassem and his wife Brandy.
Hello.
I came here last year from Jordan. At the Newcomer Center, I found more love and kindness than ever in my life. And I thank God for making me meet these wonderful people. Now I'm living the happiest days of my life. I'm so excited that now I think that these people don't have any idea how the nice thing they do affect me. I came here a helpless girl, but now I am a new person who have hope and confidence. Thank you all so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to hear the great opportunities that we have here, and to have you as a witness to that is special for us up here to hear that. If you would stay there, Dr. Cavazos and I would like to come down and give you something. Jordan tomorrow. So.
That's great. That's great. We're so happy
Hey, how are you? There we go. So, Bushra, this is a pin that only the Board of Trustees, it's our pin, and we only give these out to those that are very special and deserving. And you being honored through Newcomer Center here as Student of the Month, I'd like to present that to you to display, wear, whatever you would like. So congratulations. Thank you.
This is also for you as a token of our appreciation for being a wonderful student. So congratulations.
And we have a card here. Oh, this way?
I know, changing it up.
Yeah, you are. Like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's shift this way, so
It's a new thing.
Good. Very good. And you got your photo?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah. Oh, no, I can stand up and get one.
Sure.
Look at that.
Hey, that's up to her. It's her award.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is wonderful.
Congratulations and continued success to you.
thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda, public hearing, but there is none this evening, so we'll move to open forum for agenda items. I don't see any cards, is that correct? Okay, so we will move right over to our action items. The very first 1A, consider TASB local policy update 109. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Reich, and this is an opportunity to consider policy update 109, and there's been some discussion about these policies over the last board meeting and even some more this evening. And so we present the policies and you've received all the revisions at this time.
Okay. You don't have anything, right? You don't have to. Okay. Well, this is down as an action item. Mr. Hogg is absent this evening, away on business as the Governance Committee Chair. Also is Mr. Chapa and Ms. Walton. And I believe, Ms. Walton, you're going to say a few words?
Thank you, President Rice. Yes, I just want to thank staff and all of the input that we've had on this huge update of policies that our friends at TASB have given to us to look through. It's been quite an adventure. It's big. We've reached out a couple of times to TASB for some clarification over the, I guess it's been about 6 weeks that we've been working on this. These policies have come from the legislative session that happened a year and a half ago, and it covers quite a broad spectrum of different things that we are doing with the district, and these are the rules that we must all abide by, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. It's a lot to get through. Do we want to have any discussion, or do we just want to move right in? I can give you a motion now if you want. Okay.
That's fine.
I move that we adopt our TASB update 109 withholding 3 of the policies for more discussion. And those 3 would be CO local, DH local, and GKA local.
Okay. And Mr. Chapa, is your light for a second? Or do you have a discussion? Okay.
And I'd
Second Ms. Walton's motion.
Okay, very good. And I don't see any further lights indicating further discussion, so just for the record clarification, there's a motion on the floor and a second to approve TASB policy update 109, less local policies GH, DKA, and CO to defer back to committee. Very good. All right. With that said, as soon as we're ready, please vote. All trustees in the affirmative, present vote in the affirmative. Thank you. That's how I feel when we have to leave a board meeting too. Thank you very much. And in all seriousness, I know Mr. Hogg's not here, but Mr. Chapa, Ms. Walton, thank you so much. A mountain of work. I really, really do appreciate your thoughtful consideration and detailed consideration of everything, as well as other trustees around here working on this.
Thank the staff also.
Yes, yes, Mr. Hill and all the staff that has had to deal with these many, many voluminous pages. Thank you very much. Now let's move on. Action item B, consider appointment of individuals to the Financial Futures Committee, appointment of committee alternates, and appointment of the Financial Future Committee Chair and Assistant Chair. And looks like I will kick that over to Mr. Hibbs.
Thank you, President Reich.
There you go.
Thank you, President Reich. The Finance and Academics Committee met, and we were charged to look at appointment of new members to the FFC Committee. And these appointments that we are recommending fulfill all the individual outlined points that's written within the charge. Most importantly, ensuring that each cluster is representative and that we have a diverse segment of our community. The individuals that we have, several of them have served on the committee in the past. They were either serving one-year terms or they were alternates that were seated at some point over the course of the last year. And many of those we have chosen to go ahead and have them re-up for a 2-year term. The individuals that we have mentioned at this point is that David Wilbanks serving at large. We also are recommending that he serve as the chair. I have listed on the sheets in front of you Stephen Crumby, but Stephen is not up for placement this time, but we have, the committee did suggest that we set him as the assistant chair. The other members that will be coming out of the Arlington cluster is Mark Schotman, at large Vicki Moss, at large Emily Klophouse. From Wansingene Network, we've got Yvonne Emanuel, a teacher Sean Lynch. From Sam Houston Network, Demi Stewart. High school representative is Suzanne Kelly. And from the Martin cluster, April Pettit. We had in total 15 individuals that applied. 2 would not be eligible just because they fit employment spots, but we did want to ensure that we carried them over as alternates just in case if spots opened up that would be applicable for their placement, and that would be Brenda Lojas and then Lisa Monroe. Our other alternates that would be capable of being able to step directly in without any type of limitations, and these are listed in alphabetical order, would be from the MHS cluster would be Kyle Fields, MHS cluster Jacoy James, and then Lamar High School would be Matt Pearson. And we, over the course of the last year, used our entire alternate pool for placement. So we would very much encourage the alternates that I've listed to attend the meetings with the understanding that they just would not be able to have an active vote during the course of that. And with that, I would make a motion that we accept these recommendations for placement for a 2-year term on the FSC committee.
Okay, very good. So I have a motion by Mr. Hibbs. Can you silence your mic, Mr. Hibbs? Thank you. And Ms. Walton?
I would second Mr. Hibbs' motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I don't see any other lights indicating further discussion. Thank you to the committee. Great work. Let's go ahead and vote. Okay. All trustees present vote in the affirmative. Thank you to the committee for going through this process of picking individuals from the applicant pool. I know that's a lot of thought goes into that process, lots of variables. And to those community members, thank you very much for stepping up and being involved. Congratulations, Mr. Wilbanks, for continuing on in the chair capacity. Appreciate your work and your dedication, and look forward to more. Thank you very much. Okay, and very good. So we have FFC secured for the next year moving forward. Excellent. All right. We will move on now to the items that could be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Are there any items that trustees wish to withdraw from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we will move on. Ms. Powell, with regards to consent, can you please share bids with us?
Thank you. Dr. Reich, board members, Dr. Cavazos, good evening. We have on the consent agenda for your consideration this evening donations totaling $32,208. Those donations bring our year-to-date total to $487,457. We also have 11 bids on the agenda this evening, and in all cases, administration is recommending the lowest bids and the bids that represent the best value to the district.
Very good. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion? Let's see. Ms. Walton?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Oh, it all disappeared. Are you trying to help me back there? No? Okay, because they all just disappeared. Okay, so Ms. Walton, you made a motion. It looks like if you could turn your mic off, Mr. Hibbs. It just disappeared.
Turn it off.
There, no. And,
I second.
okay, we will refine this process. Thank you very much. So we have a motion by Mrs. Walton, a second by Mr. Hibbs to approve the consent agenda. Seeing no further lights, please vote. Oh, it says you voted. Do we have to do it? Oh, there we go. All right. Consent passes. Thank you. Moving on, the next item on our agenda, we come to discussion, and it is regarding our strategic plan, our mid-year update. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Rice. And this evening, we'd like to take an opportunity to give you a mid-year update on our strategic plan and also an opportunity to frame this update with our continued efforts to improve, continue to make modifications where we need in our strategic plan, and also to make sure our strategies are sustainable. So we'll have some of that discussion as well. So Dr. Wertz.
Good evening, Dr. Reich, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to give you a mid-year review of year 2 of the strategic plan. And while I'm the designated person who gets the privilege to talk to you tonight and to answer questions, it's really the work of many, many people that's represented tonight, some of which are in the audience, many people that are a part of these people's teams, and then of course other members of senior staff. So I'm going to do my best to articulate the work and answer any questions that you have. But it's been a good work. It's something that we enjoy doing, and it's been a pleasure to kind of figure out ways to really try to meet our students' needs in ways that will prepare them for their future. So I thought I would just start off by reminding the audience about what the core beliefs are of the system and of the board that underscore our vision and mission and our one goal that we have for students. And our belief is that our success depends specifically on a commitment to a clear vision. There's value and belief around effective teaching and leadership. We do believe in a positive culture that fosters continuous improvement and one that engages the community. And we do believe that if we do those things, that our students will excel. I'm gonna try this new machine here. I'm just gonna do that. Hold on a second. There we go. This is a reminder of our vision and mission statement, and one of the things that I'd like to focus on for the audience specifically is the goal of 100% of our students graduating exceptionally prepared for college, career, and citizenship. And the reason I say that is because as we frame the work of the strategic plan around performance objective categories, those are specifically designed with strategies intended to help students realize that one goal. And so there's been a lot of talk and discussion even among staff about what exceptionally prepared specifically means, and then how do we design programming to ensure that a student is in fact that when they graduate. There are 4 performance objective categories that align to this goal: academic achievement, college readiness, workforce readiness, leadership, citizenship, and responsibility. In year 2, we do not address all 4 of those performance objective categories. We address 3 of them, specifically academic achievement, workforce readiness, leadership, citizenship, and responsibility. Year 1, we did have strategies specifically connected to college readiness. And the reason I say that is because the design and sequencing of the strategic plan is not really about prioritizing. If it's in the strategic plan, there is a belief that it's a priority. It's really about making sure that it's sequenced in a way that we can build capacity and ensure that there's sustainability along the way. So while the performance objective category of college readiness is not being addressed in this year's specific strategies, it is addressed over several strategies over the course of the 5-year plan. As a reminder about how this timeline was actually developed, the teams analyzed the strategies and we deconstructed them into chunks and tried to sequence them in a way so they were in order. What we didn't want to do is have strategies that were going to be robust and the pre-work not having been done. And so one of the first things we did is we looked at high impact strategies and we made sure that those were spread out across the system, the 5 years. And specifically, those would be ones that have financial impacts across the system, have large human capital implications, and as well as time implications. Some of the other parameters that we considered in terms of sequencing, just as a reminder, is that no more than 25% of the plan is being implemented in any one given year. So this year I happen to be talking about what we're working on in year 2. Last year was year 1. So there are over 41 strategies, and I'm only going to be talking about a portion of them tonight, actually. We try to balance the high impact strategies sometime over the first 4 years, and we also tried to look for what we call quick wins, so ones that have high impact for stakeholders that we can consider like low-lying fruit, things that we can make an impact with quickly. In year 2, there is 1 strategy connected to workforce readiness, 9 in academic achievement areas, and then 3 that are connected to leadership, citizenship, and responsibility. If you were to go into the strategic plan documents where we monitor our progress on a quarterly basis, there is a lot of detail. For the sake of time tonight, I'm going to summarize a lot of the work and kind of hit the highlights so you get a sense of what we're actually working on. These are, and I won't read them because I know you're very familiar with them, but these are all the specific strategies that are connected to academic achievement, performance objective category for year 2. And then this is the one connected to workforce readiness, which is about students' entry into workforce outside of their secondary academic career. And then there are 3 specific strategies that are connected to leadership, citizenship, and responsibility. And all of these strategies I'll be addressing at some point tonight. So the first thing I wanted to mention as we kind of talk about these strategies in review is that this is really a continuous improvement process. The reason why the board adopts a strategic plan is because there is a need for improvement. And so one of the things that we make sure that we do as a team in terms of improvement is that we evaluate our process along the way. We meet every quarter as a senior staff with the executive team to review our progress on strategies and to look at data and decide whether we're meeting our objectives the way we intend to, whether we're going too fast, whether we need to slow down, and how do we make adjustments. And the process we use is very similar like you would consider for a district improvement plan or a campus improvement plan. The strategic plan is the overarching umbrella from which all those plans are designed, and so it cascades down. And so the same scrutiny through which we measure our progress in terms of the attainment of our goals in those 2 plans, we try to do the same thing with the strategic plan. And so this is just a simple graphic that kind of articulates the process that we go through in terms of this cycle, and we do this quarterly. And when we think about how we're going to go ahead and measure our success, we're really looking for 3 main things. And the first one is the work we're doing actually going to improve the system? Is the system getting better? Is there evidence that the system's improving with our work? Do we have the capacity in the system, and are we being intentional about building capacity? If we were to jump to the end of the story with all the things we're trying to do, if we weren't slow enough to make sure that capacity was being built along the way, there would be no sustainability over time. And that's really the key that we're trying to get to, is that when it's all said and done and we all go home at the end of the day and the work is quote unquote finished, that's outlined in the plan, will it live beyond all of us? Will it actually impact students for generations? So when we go through this process as a staff, we gather data, and we look at quantitative and qualitative data on a regular basis. In the quarterly reviews, our team brings forward where we are very specifically in each of the strategies, whether we're making some progress, no progress at all, or whether the actual strategy is complete. We look at the qualitative data that we gather from all the surveys and things that we do, as well as the quantitative data, and we try to measure whether it's impacting our kids in a meaningful way. When you go through this process, like with any continuous improvement process, it's imperative that we take the time to actually consider that there may need to be adjustments. When we always write plans, and we do this with our district improvement plan, we write them for the ideal. We have aspirations, things we want to accomplish, but if you're responsible and you're trying to do a responsible rollout, it also implies that you're going to take the time to gauge the field and get a sense of how fast you're going and whether it's meeting students' needs. And so sometimes along that way, you have to make adjustments. So with this in mind, I wanted to kind of show this graphic that I found that kind of articulates what I think people often see, which is the success part. If you know anything about an iceberg, usually these graphics kind of give the idea. There's this part that we see at the top, which we do lots of celebrating around, but there's the bulk of all the work and the things that are actually happening under the surface of the water. And so a lot of times, the iceberg that's sitting above the water is very large, and so we're very excited about all the progress we're making, but there are all these underscoring things that have to take place in order for that to happen. And one of the most important ones is focus. And so one of the things that we do in our evaluation of our work on a quarterly basis is we have to consider, like, how focused are we? How many strategies are we working on at the same time? Is there an ability to actually juggle these in a meaningful way so that we can get to the endpoint that we're all desiring? And so in that process, we evaluate. We have to consider whether we want to recommend an adjustment for timelines. And then once that adjustment is made, communicate those priorities so people in the system know what are the big rocks, so to speak, and so we're all working towards the same end. And this is for the goal of sustainability, so that when we walk away, it lives beyond us. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a sense of the strategies that we're working on this year and kind of where we are in our work, and then I'll also articulate what the next steps are. So where we are in the sitting moment, and then as the months proceed over the course of the rest of the school year, what we tend to do. So the first one is around data, and what we've been working around this year is equating and scaling data. That's very similar to the process that TEA uses. When students take a STAR exam, for example, they don't just get a pass-fail score, they receive a scale score. And we have tried to mimic that process here in Arlington as best we can. There are some limitations we have that are different than what TEA uses, but we try to get as close as possible to provide local assessment scores that are equated to the state assessment scores. We've also worked on providing raw conversion charts with scale scores, and we distribute those to campuses so they can get a sense of where their kids are falling in the same range that the way that TEA would do. And we also try to leverage the local assessment data to get a sense of, is growth happening, and what needs to happen to ensure that students are reaching the thresholds to pass. One thing that's, I think, unique to Arlington that I think we're doing a fairly good job at is being able to ensure that our test design is sound enough for us to put our scores through this equated process and to identify where gaps are and get a sense of predictive value about whether we can make interventions on the front end instead of waiting to be reactionary on the back end. So one thing that we're trying to do right now, this is more manually done in the Office of Research and Accountability, and we're working towards trying to develop a process where it's more automated. That way it's more viable and quick, happening more quickly for campuses. One of the other things that we've been doing is leveraging research design and statistics analysis to help us ensure that the quality of our exams and our test items are high. Two quick examples is the department leverages a statistical analysis called Cronbach's Alpha. And basically this is just an internal consistency, and what we're looking for in a nutshell is when you're looking at the results when they come in, your highest scoring students, if they miss 3 questions across the system, all of those kids that are the highest scoring students should be missing the same 3 questions. And the reason being is because when you do test design, the questions progressively become more and more challenging, and so your highest, your most difficult questions, if they're being missed, should be being missed by the strongest students. And so we measure to make sure there's consistency in the way those are actually panning out across the system. The other thing we look at is what we call a D-index, and that's looking, for example, at the top 25% of the scoring students and trying to measure what's the difference between them and the spread that exists between those and the lowest scoring 25% of the students. And this just allows us to provide, understand the separation between the mean and comparison to these two groups. So we intend to continue to study our test design to make it as robust as possible and to build capacity among our staff through professional learning on how to participate in that design and also to leverage the results in a way that's going to impact students. And the Office of Research and Accountability is collaborating closely with the Curriculum Office to develop these assessments so that they're truly aligned to the standards that our students are being asked to master over the course of the 6 weeks.
Dr. Wirtz, just a quick question on that. When you're referring to our assessments, is that the common assessments? Or
our curriculum assessments.
Curriculum assessments.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Another strategy that we've been working on from the Teaching and Learning Department is the rewrite of the curriculum. We have been partnering with the the C&I department has been partnering with the World Languages Department to design the new kinder through 2nd grade curriculum. They've been working specifically on the instructional focus documents, the year at a glance, the scope and sequence, and they've been collaborating to also give updates to the rubrics and the report cards that the K-2 teachers will be using. So we have standards-based report cards in the primary grades. Because the documents are being updated, we also need to update the way that those students are measured in terms of mastery and the way it's reported on the report card. So those are also being updated. We've also been garnering input on the companion document that goes with the K-2 report card, and the reason we did that is to get a sense of how is the information being communicated to parents and how can we increase the quality of that communication and make sure that it's really specific for parents in terms of what the curriculum is expecting of students and their expectations for the level of mastery that we're hoping to accomplish at the end of the year. Our next step is we're getting ready to prepare for the launch of the K-2 curriculum. The difference between last launch and this launch is we actually wrote as the school year was occurring. This year we're writing and then launching once it's actually finished. So by the end of the school year, our teachers will have access to the first 6 weeks curriculum, and then in the summer they'll get the second. We'll finish rolling it out before school starts. I thought I would take a moment to talk a little bit about why are we focusing so much on active learning. I'm sure that you have, I've mentioned it several times. I'm sure you've heard about active learning. It is our instructional model. It's a component of our instructional model. So I wanted to first start with the why. Active learning is specifically designed to leverage research-based best practices in a way that allows the students to be in the driver's seat or in control of their learning experience, and by doing so learn what we call life-ready or future-ready skills that we know that their employers and the universities they're going to be looking for in students in order for them to be successful. Going to school, there's content we all have to learn. But the reality is that you won't leverage all of the content that you learn in your secondary and elementary careers in your life post-secondary and elementary. What you'll have learned how to do is to be a critical thinker, a problem solver, a communicator. You'll learn how to be able to collaborate with other people and be self-directed and be a responsible person. And you learn those skills by having them provided to you on a daily basis in context of the actual standards you're learning. And so we have focused on developing and implementing an instructional model that is designed intentionally to do this for our students. So if you were to go into a classroom where the active learning cycle was the model that was being used to deliver instruction, you would find that students were in the driver's seat. They were being taught the content just like in any other classroom, but usually that content will be couched around a real world problem where they can synthesize their information and learn how to think critically to solve those problems in unpredictable situations. This is currently being implemented in the phase 1. So the pilot happened last school year in the spring. Phase 1 started in the fall. So the pilot's over and now we're in the middle of phase 1. There are 12 total schools that are currently involved and approximately 150 classrooms, and this is elementary, junior high, and high school. This model includes curated and created resources here in the district that are aligned specifically to those research-based practices that are embedded and mapped back to these future-ready skills that we're talking about. We've partnered with the professional learning department to facilitate classroom visits so that teachers who are implementing the active learning cycle have opportunities to see other teachers implementing that same practice in their classroom so they can learn from one another and begin to be engaged in conversations around coaching of those practices. Each of the teachers that are involved in this do receive one-on-one coaching from a coach where they set individual goals around the implementation of those best practices, and their progress is charted over the course of the year so that they can receive the assistance that they need. What we intend to do as a district is to gradually assume the training. So right now we are partnering with Engage to Learn, who helped us design and launch our framework. What will happen slowly is it's basically the gradual release model, the I do, we do, you do. So last year it was I do, so we engaged with Engage and we watched and we learned from their practice. This year we're going side by side with them, and then the following year we will own the work. And it's been designed to do that from the very beginning. It's not I call it, it's not a marriage that you stay married to forever. They're there to help us learn our practice and to launch the work, and then we own it from that place forward. So our next steps that we're working on is to finalize our responsible rollout, articulating very specifically our timeline, the support structures, and the things that we want to put in place to promote campus readiness. So if you're a campus that's coming online 2 years down the road, what do you need to do to ready your staff for that transition? And if you're in the process right now, what kind of supports are you going to continue to receive? We're also designing or scheduling design days so that elementary and junior high campuses that are engaged in the active learning cycle process will be receiving professional learning where we'll sit side by side with them and guide them through the process of designing, going from our curriculum documents and designing the actual learning experience for students. And it will give us an opportunity to have teachers who are teaching similar content areas paired with each other so they can collaborate with one another and do so in a way that will allow us to kind of design a structure so there's some continuity about how they go about that process. We've also been working on building our coaching capacity. So if you were to look throughout our system, whether you're a teacher who's in the classroom all the way up pretty much to the superintendent, all of us engage in coaching. I have an executive coach, principals get coached by the area superintendents, teachers are coached by coaches. coaching is part of what we believe in. And so what we've done is we've tried to fine tune the art of coaching, which would be like the disposition of the coach, the questioning strategies and things that you would do, with the what we call the science of it. What are the actual steps that you want to take a person through to make sure that it's evidence-based and that the person's growing and moving. And then the last thing that we intend to, you'll see happening, is begin celebrating and badging or micro-credentialing teachers who have mastered the best practices. And so I actually intend to bring those to you as we get launching over the course of the semester, to honor and recognize teachers who are implementing best practice in their classroom, to reinforce our desire to acknowledge what teachers are doing in their classroom to meet students' needs. And so we're putting a system in place to allow teachers to actually be acknowledged and recognized when they're implementing one of those 12 best practices and reaching levels of proficiency through their coaching process. The Professional Learning Department has also been working with district leaders to develop a year-long professional learning calendar, and they've been collaborating on the design of that with the inclusion of common learning resources to ensure that there is coherence across the system in the way that we deliver professional learning to teachers and staff across departments. So we're moving more towards a competency-based professional learning experience. So rather than having random workshops where people go to workshops and they earn credit for time, we're looking at very specifically trying to build your skill sets around competencies. And so one of the things we've worked on doing is making sure that there is consistency across the departments in terms of the quality of delivery, so that if you engage in professional learning from the curriculum instruction department, the quality isn't different than if you were to receive professional learning, say, from the special education department. It's based on competency. So we've been working with the different departments to help improve and provide tools, the coherence and the expectations in terms of quality across those departments. We will also continue to develop new models that allow for personalized and deep learning opportunities. So there's, just like students, there's lots of ways you can acquire new content and practice your skills. It doesn't have to be in a face-to-face setting. It can be in a blended environment. It can be online. And we want to acknowledge that, that just like kids do learn differently, our teachers learn differently. And one quick example that I can offer around that is our Transformational Learning Department has started the process, and we launched a couple of pilot courses this last fall around gifted and talented certification, or the 6 hour updates, or the 30-hour required training that those teachers have to have. We know, and we receive feedback from teachers, why do we always have to have that face-to-face? Why can't we also have opportunities to learn that online? And so we launched a couple of courses this last fall to try to give that some flexibility to teachers in the ways they learn. The last thing I want to mention quickly about professional learning before I move on is this concept around micro-credentialing. So back to the work that we've been working on with Holdsworth, the idea is that we create pathways for people to grow and develop themselves in their career, whether you want to stay in the classroom and become a teacher leader, want to work towards campus leadership or executive leadership. And so we're in the process of thinking about how do we design micro-credentialing. So if I'm a person, I want to be an instructional coach, how do I go through the training to actually acquire the credentials, local credentials that we would expect for a person prior to actually placing you in the role? Another area that we've been working on is increasing the equity of access of students across our system and programming. And so right now the department is working to develop a comprehensive plan so that there's a full continuum of services and supports for all student types at every school. The idea ultimately is that regardless of who you are and what your needs are, that you can go to the school where you live in your neighborhood and we can serve you. That's our ultimate goal. And so we are actively working on designing a plan for how to make that happen. We're also trying to create resources for and tools for campuses to help them in their differentiation of students to meet their needs. And so, for example, one of the things that recently happened is the Department of Educational Support Services made accessible and placed on the internet for teacher access a 3-tier professional learning plan with tools and resources that align specifically to collaborative teaching, how to make that happen, to the T-test tool, which is what teachers are evaluated against, and also the rigor and relevance rubric that we've been teaching across the system in terms of how to design quality work and tasks for students. The next steps that we're going to work on is continue to embed or build on those tools to build culture and capacity around this concept around equity and access, and then to further communicate the multi-tier professional learning plan and make sure that when it's being implemented at the schools, that they're being supported so that it can be done with fidelity. So in Arlington, we believe that being bilingual matters and that students who are bilingual have opportunities. And so we want to expand that program to more students in Arlington. And so we've been working on developing visionary documents for the expansion of world language programming here in Arlington. Two specifically that we're working on is how to expand the dual language immersion program so that students have access to that opportunity. And when we say dual, we're actually considering which languages. It doesn't necessarily have to be Spanish. What are kids actually interested in? We're also looking at FLES programming. And the distinction, just as a reminder, between FLES and foreign language at an elementary school and what we would call enrichment is about exposure. So you go to school, you take a specialist class, Chinese might be one, you learn a few things about the culture, you may learn a few words, but that's pretty much the gist of it. That is not our goal in Arlington. Our goal is that kids learn enough language they can actually leverage it at some point in their life. So FLES requires more time. And so what we're trying to do right now is design opportunities for students to engage in the FLES program at the elementary schools and to figure out ways to include that in the schedule. And what it ultimately will do is it will require or give students, even at the elementary school, choice. We always think, I think in elementary school, that every student has to be involved in everything. But just like kids in upper grades, kids in elementary grades eventually start to figure out where their interests lie and they want to have choice. And so we also want to provide that choice to them, and FLES will give them a chance to do that. The World Language Department has also been collaborating with the Curriculum Instruction Department in the development of the K-2 dual language immersion Spanish program. And one of the things that we've been working on is how to really address the Spanish language arts standards that are required to be taught. Upcoming things are curation of resources to support both of these two programs, and then also to design and implement professional learning to support them and help teachers as they put them in their classroom. Another area that we have been focused on actually for the last few years is the expansion of pre-K offerings. We know that if you can work with students from cradle to age 5, you really set them up for success long term. And so the department's been working specifically to try to develop real strategies to recruit more students into our pre-K programs and to find ways to reach out to parents to make sure they're aware of the programming options and to find ways to remove barriers so they can participate. The pre-K recruitment team has been collaborating. We've also been collaborating with Commit. Commit is a partnership. They're actually based out of Dallas County, but they have reached out. They actually came to Arlington. They reached out to us to see if we'd be willing to partner with them to start that process in Tarrant County. And the idea behind it is that they look basically at what are the best practices, what's actually working, how do we spread those practices around. And so one of the things we want to do, what we've been doing with Commit, is trying to coordinate when our registration times are so that when they're advertising pre-K registration across all parts of the Metroplex, we know we're included in that number. We're also working on trying to expand our community-based pre-K because it actually takes pre-K opportunities and places them in situations for parents who need to have their students looked after all day long. Some of the next steps we want to work on is to continue to, we're getting ready to launch that marketing campaign with Commit that's coming in the next couple of months. Our roundup will be April 2nd through the 13th, and then we'll also have a centralized location where students can register over the course of the summer should they happen to miss the roundup. One of the things in the strategic plan is that we align our resources and that we align them in such a way that we can actualize the programming and the experiences that we want students to have. The finance department has prepared a 4-year budget forecast, which I know that you have seen, and they've researched options for a tax rate swap through a TRE. So that's something that's being investigated. The FFC committee has reviewed our long-range financial needs. We've looked at enrollment trends, considered what the legislative environment actually is, and what possible requirements or impacts a TRE would have on our system. Next, they will present actually to you the long-range budget needs on the February 15th board meeting, so that's upcoming. In terms of bond, 2014, the architects have actually been engaged for 7 bid packages that are included in Phase 4. And the Phase 4 projects are in the latter parts of their design phase. So they're getting to the end of that point. Construction bids for projects that are part of Phase 4 will be issued in the spring, so in the next several months. Also, we've been in the process of conducting a capacity and utilization study of our facilities across the district, and it's underway by Cooperative Strategies. So formerly, they were known as DeJean Richter, but they were acquired, and so they have a new name, Cooperative Strategies, and they're helping us just identify what are the needs that we anticipate having in the system and any considerations we need to think about as we start moving forward and developing the programs that we have for our students. We're actually expecting that study to be completed at the end of March, so we'll have results sometime around that time. Another area we are working on is to ensure that our students, when they leave us in high school, that they have a seamless entry into the workforce. And so some of the things we've been doing is increasing the number of dual credit CTE programs that our students have access to. And so right now they're in the enrollment process, and so which courses we'll make will depend upon where their interest lies, but we've been collaborating closely with Tarrant County College to offer the programs and give our students choice. And the list that you can see on the screen are the ones that are actually scheduled to go online in the 18-19 school year. Some of the other things we're working on is pathways and certification completion expansion, so trying to identify additional pathways and certification opportunities for our students. One of the things we've really committed to around our CTE dual credit courses or our CTE courses in general is that they have one of those 2 things attached to them. It's an opportunity for them to earn dual credit, or there's some workforce cert that they can leverage when they're finished to enter the workforce. We've also been working with TCC to find ways to have our own embedded faculty. Right now, many districts are reliant on the community colleges to provide the professors to teach the dual credit. They do have specific requirements for accreditation. And so one of the things that we're doing is investigating how can we find the staff that's already internal who qualify to actually teach in those settings so that we can reduce our reliance upon an outside entity to meet our students' needs in terms of dual credit. And then finally, master scheduling. That's always something that we work on in the spring to make sure that these courses are not only available, but students can come back and forth in between their traditional high schools and the CTC. Finally, another area that we've been working on is the strategies that are connected to cultural awareness. And so in the last semester, we've been implementing professional learning opportunities for staff and leadership. There are 5 main areas where this has been occurring around: classroom behavior basics, culture and relationships, structure and relationships, positive interactions and reinforcements, and corrections. We've also been in the process of developing or researching social emotional learning. I had the opportunity with Mr. Hill to go with a team to Austin ISD, who's known for their social emotional learning platform. We're very invested in trying to find a way to address all the needs of the child. So think of the whole child. And so we are working, actually we have a meeting coming on Monday where the team is gathering together to really try to figure out a way to create a system where the efforts that we have to meet our students' needs are being coordinated. So when you're learning in the classroom curriculum, how is social emotional learning being embedded there? When you're receiving guidance or assistance from a counselor, where is that entry point? If you are receiving support and assistance from, say, Tori Sisk's office, where they're working on behavior and development, how do we put all these pieces together? And then also the group from Mr. Hill's Department for Student Services. And so the efforts right now are to try and create a seamless system where all those pieces naturally come together. So when a child is being taught in Arlington ISD, they're being taught in a holistic way. Some of the next steps that we continue around that area is to continue to identify areas of support to make sure that there's a continued implementation of PBIS with cultural awareness in mind. We have been investigating our data trends to guide the support for campuses. So campuses who are experiencing challenges, we want to provide them support so that they can meet those needs. and then also find bright spots in the system that are working well so that we can identify what's working and how we can replicate those things. And then, of course, continue to work and finalize the social emotional learning programming, including identifying what are best practices and how can we best integrate those into a system in a seamless way. Another area we've been working on, and I know you've received lots of information about this, is around our strategy about enhancing core leadership competencies. We've spent a tremendous amount of work on this, and it's still ongoing. This graphic, I won't go over it in detail because I know you've already heard it at length in a previous presentation, but the arrow represents pretty much exactly where we are in the process. We have finalized our cultural tenets, and we have completed, we're getting close to the very end of completing our iteration of the leadership definition. And so we will begin the process of working on the systems that you'll see above the leadership definition, which is around role clarity. How do you leverage the leadership definition depending on, are you a leader of leaders? Are you a leader of yourself? Do you lead a group of people? What does that look like? And then also creating data systems. How do you evaluate them? How do you incentivize the implementation of these things in your personal work? And then finally, articulating and developing a strong communication plan so that the system's moving and functioning as one unit. Our work has been primarily around three main things with Holdsworth, and the first one is to really develop a critical mass of leaders who have a shared experience and have a common vision for what excellence looks like. The only way you move student learning in a system is if you're moving with as one voice, and so it's important in this process that we take the time to truly define what quality leadership looks like and create systems to reinforce it and to promote it through coaching so that we walk away not only talking about what excellence looks like, but actually embodying it. We also been working to find ways to develop systems to enhance district level capacity. So the team that's currently working with Holdsworth is district leadership. We're getting ready to identify campuses that will then begin their process next school year. And over the course of the system, you will have had 60% of our campus leadership teams and district leadership gone through this process to really fine tune it and to create this common vision for what leadership should look like. And then finally, Holdsworth helps us through a strategic approach to really build a bench for future leaders and to identify not only who are the potential leaders in our system and identify them early so we can develop them towards end roles, but also make sure that that best talent is being placed in or naturally placed in positions where there's a good fit. This is just a reminder of our cultural tenets. So we met recently with our district directors and above. So there was actually a room of many leaders in the room to really try to make sure there was clear understanding in the team about what the cultural tenets truly are. And then they worked in groups to identify and articulate action plans to begin to roll these tenets out into their departments over the course of the next 2 months, as well as to design communication strategy. And then what we intend to do, actually starting in the next couple of weeks, is working on an overall large system-wide district communication strategy where we introduce cultural tenets and then start to layer in the definition of leadership and what that looks like so that it's done in a way that's consumable. We talked really thoughtfully about how much to push out at one time, and we wanted to make sure people could digest it, understand it. So our intent is to first roll out the cultural tenets, help people understand that, and then link that naturally to our leadership definition, which is actually, these are embedded in there. We recently went through a leadership assessment, and so we're in the process of reviewing the data attached to those assessments, identifying our priorities of our work, and leveraging that assessment data to make sure that we're making impact so that when we implement these systems, we know we're actually making movement. And in terms of our leadership definition, this is just a reminder of the process we went through where we leveraged research to make sure that we all understood clearly what research says quality leadership looks like, and that those components and indicators are actually embedded into our framework. And you should see the framework develop soon. This was these are some pictures from the actual work itself when we were developing the framework, and that's a list of the different types of people that were part of the task force. So the next steps on this strategy is to finalize the leadership definition and share it and communicate it with staff. We are then this semester going to be working on identifying the expectations for what that translates into in terms of behaviors, depending upon your roles. And then finally, we will begin to develop systems aligned to that definition that reinforce and support the growth of our staff to acquire the skills and the dispositions that are really embody the definition that the team wants. The last area that I'm going to share with you tonight is around customer service. So we've had over 225 employees recognized for excellent customer service. So if you read our AISD newsletter that goes out every month, that's just one small example of how they're actually articulated. You'll see their pictures. We try to reinforce the specific behaviors that are attached to the specific tenants. We also have these nominating platforms that people can nominate people who they observe doing these things, and they receive certificates and acknowledgement. So this platform is, you can even use it, it's a QR code. You could scan a QR code and send in a nomination. We are also working on marketing and visibility with the communications department. So there's posters that have been created that are being sent out to all the common areas in the schools, so that customer service or the framework of serve is something that's becoming part of what people see and hear about. And then also there have been stickers that have been generated and labeled so to go on the phones in each of our facilities, so that when people answer the phones, there's reminders about the kind of disposition or the way that we want to serve our customers when they reach out to us. We continue to do monthly training, and there is a task force of people that help us with that. So our next step is we have 8 campuses and 2 central office departments that will serve as pilots to gauge the practices specifically in February. So we're actually looking to see, how's it going? We've launched it. How are we doing? And then we will gather feedback on the strengths and challenges in the delivery of customer service, so that we can customize our professional learning and supports to make sure that it's happening at schools. So I thought I would close just by reiterating, this is all a process, so we're in the middle of it. There are things that are going really, really well, and there are things that we're still trying to figure out, but it's all towards a very specific end. And I think I can speak for the group to say we feel very positive about the progress we've made so far and the good things that we're doing for our students. Questions?
Excellent information. Give me just a moment here. Questions from any trustees? Ms. Hudson?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, President Reich. That was a lot. That was a lot to take in. And that's because a lot is going on in the district. It's a vast amount of work, and I really appreciate that there's an urgency, because our kids only get to go to first grade one time, second grade one time. There's a finite amount of time that we have to impact these kids. And so the urgency of your work is something that I really appreciate. I have just a couple of questions, specifically regarding the active learning cycle. Okay. How are you measuring success with that? Is it student behavior, or is it content mastery, or?
So that's a really good question. And since this is the first year, there are 2 ways that we're going to, actually a couple of ways we're going to do it. One is measuring implementation. So how well is implementation actually going? How is it being done with fidelity? So there's a couple of ways that we do that. We have coaches that are attached to principals and coaches that are attached to teachers, and we have a system that's actually a system that's online, where you can actually see specifically the goals that teachers are setting in terms of best practice and their progress from month to month in terms of their level of proficiency, because the best practices are attached to rubrics. So it's all mapped back to T-tests and the future ready skills, but we physically can watch teachers' progress in terms of their implementation of practice to make sure it's being done with fidelity. And then it also allows us to gauge. We also gather qualitative data in terms of how well it's going. We walk classrooms with teachers, and then we have PLCs, for example, with principals. And I personally have been meeting with principals one-on-one to talk with them about what's working, what's not working, what are some supports that you need. And I've been doing that work myself as well. So that's that. The other side is the students. And so one of the things I'm trying to measure, I want to make sure is happening, is how well are students performing under this scenario. And there's a lot of research for the implementation of these best practices, because sometimes the actual cycle itself is not this just random thing, right? It's connected to research-based best practices. So there are basically 5 main researchers that they're attached to, which have statistical numbers that will say that when these are implemented in a classroom, this is the effect size it has on students' outcomes. So we want to measure, one, are they actually implementing the best practice? Because if kids are doing or not doing well, I need to correlate that to how well the actual best practice is being implemented. I can't just look at them isolated. So now that I have data that I'm gathering about how well the coaches are saying the implementation is occurring, what I've asked the research department to do is we've identified all the teachers that are in the cycle and specifically which content areas they're teaching the cycle in. Because what we've allowed teachers to do is, I really want to promote risk-taking. I don't want everyone to feel like I can't mess up or I can't try something new. We acknowledge that changing an adult behavior, and specifically around a teaching practice, takes time. We're all learners. And so I wanted to make sure that teachers knew that and that we were supportive of that. And so there was no requirement that a teacher who learns the cycle, and let's say it's a self-contained elementary teacher, that they had to do it in all content areas. What we said, and I personally said it at the training, was pick one. Pick one and just try it out. See how it goes. So what I did is, what I've asked the department to do is to assess those students. So if you taught 3rd grade math, for example, I'm looking specifically at what are the results of the students that are receiving their learning through the cycle for 3rd grade math from that teacher in comparison to a control group who isn't receiving it at all. It's a little challenging, just to be honest, because some of the content areas where the cycle is being implemented, we don't gather district-wide data. So you have to kind of like triangulate it in some ways. But that's the process we're in right now. I also acknowledge that when you implement something new, there's always an implementation dip. And so I'm trying to be aware of how that kind of works too, because what you don't want to do is kind of, stop something that's going to be really, really good if you just wait a minute. So I think math is a really good example for this year. Last year, the year before, our curriculum was brand new. And this year, they had it for the full year and it wasn't, and our scores went up. So you'd have to just give people time to let them master practice. So that's kind of the process we're going through right now to validate our work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how are you garnering feedback from the teachers as far as the challenges that they're having implementing it, if there's anything that we can do structurally to facilitate their success and the students' success in
Right.
this?
So one, I get it specifically to the principals, and then we also have opportunities. We will have opportunities even this spring where we bring them all together to do training, and we will facilitate or solicit their feedback in the process too, because what we want to do is make sure the support structures are in place. Some of the things that we've done too, and I've received feedback from teachers very specifically about like training. And so one of the things I want to know is, what is about the training that you like or don't like, and how can we restructure or structure it in such a way that is meaningful to you? And so one of the things that our team is doing right now, for example, with Engage to Learn, is to redesign the training in the summer, because we learned some things. So for example, last year we had 3 days of training. It was a different type of training experience because it was a lot of design think and learning without us just like spoon feeding it to you. And so that always creates a little bit of dissonance for teachers because they're not used to that. And so we thought about that, like, how do we do this in such a way so people walk away feeling comfortable and enthused about the process and not discouraged by it? So that's one thing we're thinking about. And the other thing is, it's one thing to get training in June, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to go implement in September. There's this gap of time, and you go home for summer. So we're going to break it up and do a couple of days of introduction, and then we're going to swing back around and do a design day with them in August. So there's a chance for them to reorient themselves to it and have us sit side by side with them as they start designing their units for the beginning of the school year. So soliciting feedback from them, listening to the coaches, that's kind of how we intend to do it.
Okay. And then, is our goal to have every grade basically implementing the active learning cycle, or does it kick in at 2nd or 3rd grade?
No, the goal is that we believe it's good for all kids, and we want 100% of our students doing it over when we're finished by the rollout, the 5 years. One thing I want to clarify too is the active learning cycle is specifically around best practices and the skills that you're learning as a student. It's not around a specific project-based kind of way of doing it, although a teacher could leverage that if they want to. What we're looking for is, how do you implement the best practice, and how do you facilitate a learning experience for students that's highly relevant and rigorous? That's what we're looking for. So we want students, regardless of their age group, and we have showed even to principals when we were doing the initial introduction to it, concrete examples of what relevant instruction looks like for like in a first grade writing class, all the way to high school. So we want kids to be able to engage in learning in a way that's interesting to them, that actually has context to their life, and it is not just learning a content or a standard around a standard, that they actually enjoy it and that it means something to them. And we feel that that should start as early as they come to school.
So, in the long run, how will we measure success as far as the student behavior? I'm assuming that we're still measuring content mastery, that's the ultimate goal. But teaching them how to teach themselves kind of in the future is also part of what's being embedded, if I understand the active learning cycle correctly.
Right, well, you put them in the driver's seat, so you're trying to give them the tools to make meaning of their learning with the support and facilitation of a teacher. So one of the things that we will ask the students, so for example, in the survey we ask students every year, one of the simple questions we ask them is, are you bored? We want to know, and I will look at it differently this year. We will pull that question apart, and I will specifically, or the team, we will look at what is the response rate of kids that are in the active learning cycle, and what are the response rate of the kids that aren't, and is there a difference? One of the other things that survey asks them is around strategies. We ask them about strategies they like or don't like. So we intend to ask kids about their experience. And honestly, if you have an opportunity to go into a classroom where the cycle is being implemented, it's so refreshing and engaging. I could stay in one of them, all day. The kids are very excited and they're really interested in their learning, and they're learning the same content as their neighbor, but they're doing it in a way that's completely relevant to them. And I think that's the difference. So we intend to ask the kids, what do you think about it? So one other thing I want to say too is we recognize that every kid learns differently. Some kids struggle kind of being on their own. So the idea is not just to leave those kids out on their own. If your learning style means you need more guidance and support, we're committed to making sure you receive more guidance and support.
I appreciate that. That was my final question,
Yeah.
so you addressed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Hudson. Mr. Hibbs. Oh,
Sorry.
there you go.
Thank you. Dr. Wertz, I appreciate the presentation. I mean, your presentations are always well laid out and very, very informative. Strategic plan, and when we went towards the creation of the first plan, now the second plan, was trying to ensure that we've got an engaged system overall, not just the students, but with our faculty and with the administration. We've got some incredible things that's happening to be recognized by the Holdsworth Foundation, to be part of that, to be on the leading edge and creative exchange of ideas that could be worked with and implemented within our district, the different opportunities that the superintendent and throughout our district has been able to have this group of shared ideas. And I know that's leading back to a lot of the things that we're implementing. One thing I'm always just afraid of, and I just want to be brutally honest, is that are we getting the buy-off at the campus level by, our teachers that are actually implementing it? Because it's one thing from the board standpoint to say, this is what we would like to see happen, and then the administration, you guys go to great lengths to be able to develop the plan, the outline, the cultural attendance, the drivers that we're going to be looking towards, and then it's presented to the principals. And so as you get these layers, you have to have that individual buy-off at each layer, and then it gets to the teachers. For the active learning process that we're looking towards, I'm just ecstatic by the where we're challenging the students. But I know that we had one hiccup at one junior high campus this year where it just didn't seem like all the teachers grasped the system, and it seemed like it caused issues with the parents, and, and we had to go and um, um, basically say we're going to step back. I
It
mean,
wasn't the active learning cycle, that was actually a different issue.
oh, the one that was taking place at Young? Okay.
Yeah, I know which one you're referring to.
Okay.
It wasn't involving the.
Okay, it wasn't just active learning
It was
itself.
something completely.
But let me use that as an example, because it was a new strategy and a new process. And it seemed like maybe we just hadn't defined it or refined it enough, and just ensuring that we've got a situation that we're not into a middle of a semester where we're, the entirety of the group hasn't yet been able to have the full understanding, the full buy-off. I mean, what processes do we put in place to say, okay, in order for us assuring that this, these strategic matrix that we've put out there are actually being met, but it's not causing a disruption, at a campus, because, teachers are saying, we're teaching curriculum assessments, we're teaching for the STAR testing, and then we're trying to add in these new learning measures and such. How are we assuring that I guess all of them mesh, how, effectively work together, where it's just not just kind of a piling on of sort, but one that's working to an end where we should be more successful? My end-all question is what are we doing to assure that the campus level, the teachers, not the principals, but the teachers, are actually being able to give us the buy-in and buy-off on?
So, so the stuff that actually we work on, so there are campus initiatives and then there are district-wide initiatives, and the one you're referring to is a campus initiative. So that was completely done at that school. It wasn't part of the district system. Okay. So, and what we try to do with principals in that scenario, and in our scenario when we're working with creating a system, is to think about how do you, and we've actually had this conversation with principals even last month, is like, how do you consider multiple things when you're designing the work to make sure it gets all the way down to what you said, the teacher, because it's one thing to have the principal know what's happening, and it's another thing to have teachers feel differently about it. So the way I can frame it that we've talked most recently about with principals is this idea of creating tactical moves. Like what are the actual tactical moves that you would want to do to make sure that the pathway that you generate for the teachers to actually implement is smooth and that you've removed barriers? And then also, how do you spend time addressing the why so that people really understand the why and they're emotionally committed to the process before you launch? And then finally, really being clear about how do you shrink the change in such a way so that it's bite-sized and people can actually do it. So those are the things we think about in our system. So when it comes to the work that we're doing around, say, the active learning cycle, one of the things that we're doing is doing what I just described, thinking about what are the three parts. So tactical moves we have to actually do to make it happen. What are the cultural things we have to address to make sure people understand the why and are actually invested? And then also, what are the ways that we can actually mark the path so that it's clear and meaningful to people and that we remove barriers along the way? And so for us, literally, it's about strategy. You have to kind of think about that. We don't, at central office, we don't have a lot of direct access to a teacher in the classroom. So what we have to do, and what we're in the process of doing is, and this has been learning specifically around the cycle, I'll say, is figuring out how do you create tools and resources for principals. So for example, when it comes to finalizing, one of the steps I mentioned in the presentation is finalizing the responsible rollout of the active learning cycle. One of the things that we have to do is figure out, and what we have now is how do we measure readiness? Meaning, like, how do I measure that campus XYZ is actually ready to start this process? And once I've measured that there's readiness there, what kinds of tools and supports can we put in place to help the principal with that process? And then the other thing is, how do we help people get ready when we know they're coming online 2 and 3 years down the road? Because when it comes to, for example, the active learning cycle, I'll just use my work, for example. We spent an entire year on the why with principals before we launched it in a single classroom. And so what we've been thinking about is, how do we support a principal in doing that same process with their staff, so that when they come online, the staff is like, oh yeah, we understand what we're trying to do and what the end point is. And it's been a learning journey, you know? So that's kind of where we're working on right now, is finalizing this process of the responsible rollout, so that when campuses come online, we can measure that you are in fact ready. And if you know that you're scheduled to come online 2 and 3 years down the road, that you as a principal know that in advance, and you also have tools and resources to help you ready your staff to get them there. The final point I would make too is, it's important that you start new initiatives with people who are eager. So like the active learning cycle, we didn't select anybody. We let the principals self-select themselves to be in the program. Like, I met with them actually personally, individually, went over exactly what we were gonna be doing, and let them opt in or out. And they chose their own staff, and we encouraged them to pick people who wanted to do it. And with the idea that you build capacity with people who want to do it, and then eventually other people come on board. We didn't mandate it of people. Eventually, we want to get to a place, to answer the question you asked earlier, that everybody does it. So eventually, people who aren't interested eventually have to come on board, but that's not the way we started the initiative. Because of the reason that you described earlier, we want people to feel comfortable in going through the process.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, and I do want to be clear and apologize that I was actually combining a program, a different programming with the active learners. So I apologize if I caused any confusion with that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Dr. Cavazos, you want to say?
Yeah, I think it's also important to note, because I think you mentioned it, but just a little deeper, in these strategies, and we can kind of go on several examples, but they're actually being built by and with the teachers. So the active learning cycle was built with the teachers,
Right.
not just the principals or administration.
Right.
Customer service included committees, continues to include committees from all over the district, including teachers and support staff, et cetera. The cultural tenets, we have focus groups, 2 teachers from every campus that have helped in the calibration of our cultural tenets. The leadership definition has a committee that's actually with teachers that's helping us build this definition. So the big pieces in the strategic plan strategies are actually being developed in partnership with teachers. I think what Stephen was mentioning is all the implementation ways and things like that, but just to be clear, the big strategies, especially in this report, are actually with teachers being built, not just implemented. And there's a whole different aspect of implementation and professional development, things like that, but the entire big systems, cultural tenets being one of them, leadership definition, they actually include teachers and staff across the board to make sure that we have not only the buy-in, but their input in developing these big strategies. So that's another important piece, I think, that we've been very intentional about including teachers and staff from across the district in different departments.
If I could just ask a clarification with that, then those teachers that are involved in that planning process, when we go to pilots or a phase 1 implementation, I would assume then that those teachers that were part of that process are also acting as part of the implementation champions for communicating it out to the rest of the staff.
The communication, because
Yeah.
it's you don't have that many campuses involved in the development of it, but the communication part of it, exactly, and part of the credentialing and recognition of the implementation of active learning cycle includes obviously the people that are implementing it, to make sure we reinforce that. But fundamentally, the active learning cycle was built with teams of teachers and principals and other staff from across the district.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Walton, there we go.
Thank you, President Reich. Just following up on, this discussion line that we're on, exciting things are happening, and I'm very glad that we have learned to, ask for volunteers and, let them participate. And any time that we can empower teachers and give them an opportunity to participate, like some of the outline that Dr. Cavazos just gave us, I think that's a really good thing. I encourage us to you and the rest of the group to do more of that, expand that if at all possible. I had a question about curriculum writing and revision with the K2 report card. I don't know which slide that was. Oh, curriculum writing and revision. What does this look like? I mean, what's the change? Is it a major change or?
Well, Jacqueline's been working closely with the team on the design, so I'm gonna let her answer that question.
Good evening. So one of the pieces around the rubric is, since we are making modifications to the actual instructional focus document, it'll look a little bit different from the K2 curriculum that we currently have. And so the sequencing of the skills that students are going to be mastering from K through 2 are currently outlined in the rubric and also for each grade level, and then also in the report card. And so we're trying to make sure that the report card that we move forward with for next year is completely aligned to the new standards, as well as include some components that we're updating around social emotional learning, communication, and some other pieces that we want to make sure are embedded in the new report card, so everything's reflected and aligned. So there aren't going to be many changes in terms of the structure or the format of the report card. It's just making sure that the alignment between the skills that students are mastering that are outlined and identified in the report card are also the same that our teachers are focusing on in the classroom.
Okay. Have we done any focus groups, or
Yes.
can you tell me about
Sure.
some of that?
So we started off with a committee that was represented with teachers from a variety of campuses. So we actually did sent out notifications for teachers who wanted to participate. We also shared with principals opportunities for them to let us know about teachers that would be or interested or involved, wanted to be involved in the process. And then we put together 2 different meetings that were scheduled, half-day meetings for the committee that was representing teachers from K through 2. We had communications involved. We had student behavioral support systems. We had special education supports, every department in academic services. And in addition to that, we also had technology representation so that we also could address some of those technology skills as well. So we kind of put a very cross-section of stakeholders together to meet and have conversations about the rubric, and it was very positive. One of our next steps is to meet with parents. We're going to have a small parent focus group, and that's where Dr. Wirtz mentioned the companion guide, being able to come back and have some discussion around their communication. What are some additional pieces they would want included, and is it clear, and are they having the understanding around what skills are necessary for their students to master at the end of each grade.
Yeah, because we need those parents helping us teach that age child as much as any other place.
So we're actually meeting with communication, and Erin Perales is working with us on that component as well.
Good deal, good deal. On the next slide, and I don't know if this is for you or for Dr. Wirtz, active learning, you listed several bullets there. One thing I'm hearing more about a need for is media intelligence. And I know K through 2 might be a little young, but maybe not. But helping students judge biases of sources of information. There's adults can't do it, in some regard. So I think it might be something important that we start including in these areas that we're talking, that, it kind of fits in with those areas. So has anything been looked at about that, or?
Not specifically about that, but it's intuitively part of the design, because one of the components around that is research, and so you have to teach kids how to do that well. So if you were to go into a classroom where active learning cycle is being taught or leveraged to facilitate teaching, you're putting kids in a situation where they're also acquiring information, and we recognize that they have access to all the information that more than we can actually teach them. And so that's part of our process, is teaching them how to decipher between things that are actually relevant and things that aren't. The bullets that you see on the screen right here are what we call are almost like what I would say a profile of a student, meaning when we say a student walks across the stage in Arlington and we call them exceptionally prepared, we say they've mastered how to do these things. And the way that they get to do those things is by doing it in context of their learning, which is some of the stuff that you were just asking about, like being able, you can't really communicate and problem solve if you can't and think critically unless you apply that critical thinking in terms of like say even research and figure out like what is something that's valid that I need to be paying attention to and what stuff I can discard. So that's part of the process.
Yeah, well, and also the source.
Right.
You know, there's so many sources out there now, and some of them are valid and some of them aren't.
Absolutely.
And how do you judge the difference? It's hard for adults, so, you know, kids will probably master it quicker than some of us will. I don't know if we've talked about this. The next slide, instructional model implementation. Thank you. The finalizing responsible rollout. How is this looking? How are you getting feedback from teachers on this?
So when I say the responsible rollout, what I'm referring to is the pace at which we go.
Right.
So when we launched it initially, we had I would say, not a Gantt chart, but basically in essence, we had a timeline for this is how many schools we intended to come on each year. And the idea initially was that we would leverage what I said were volunteers or people that were interested. But we also recognize that there's at some point, as we've been kind of going through the process, since this is a continuing learning process, obviously, we realize that ambiguity sometimes makes it difficult. So if I'm a principal, it's advantageous for me to know up front about probably when I'm coming online and not learning about it in the spring before it's about to happen.
Sure.
Because then I can prep my staff and I can start thinking about how do I frame it. So one thing we've done is we've married what we call what is known as the rigor and relevance framework to the active learning cycle. It's essentially the content, the way that you would think about learning or tasks are very similar in terms of like rigor, highly rigorous and highly relevant. And so that's something we're teaching all schools right now. Every school is involved in that kind of training. And I was just, for example, with Dr. Buell and principals today out at Key, literally going into classrooms and charting the tasks the kids are at and where were we on the rigor and relevance framework and having conversations about that. So with that in mind, knowing the whole system's learning that, what we realize is it's important for us now to stop, we've learned, and articulate what is the rollout actually going to be. It doesn't mean you can't adjust it. It just means that principals need to have heads up about what's happening. So to answer your question, what we are doing, and we're actually have it scheduled to happen this month, is gather a group together to talk about what does readiness look like. We have a rubric now that we're using. We're going to finalize that. Which schools land on that readiness rubric? Where do they fall? Of the ones that are ready, what order should we go in and where do they live? Meaning we want to make sure there's representations of kids and people all across town, and then map out year by year which schools we think we can support online. And with that in mind, also think about the district systems to make sure that the systems and the things are embedded to make sure that when they do come online, the resources are all there ready to go. So when I say responsible rollout, I'm specifically talking about that. It's the timeline, readiness assessment, principal, here's the support and tools you can use to ready your staff if you're coming on several years down the road. And if you're coming online next year, this is what you can expect from us in terms of supporting you in your process.
Well, I'm encouraged because I think it's so important for not only, for you to share that with the principal, but for that principal to know how important it is to share that same information with the teachers because they're going to be the implementers and they need to be privy to that information too. So that's encouraging.
Ms. Walton, one moment. Dr. Cavazos wants to add a little
Just
bit of
a quick point, and it was part of the beginning of the presentation, but it really applies to all of it. This is a very good example on evaluating our capacity and our sustainability. And so we fully recognize, as we've had many discussions here, that the strategic plan, if there needs to be adjustments in terms of implementation to slow it down a little bit or accelerate or make adjustments into the number and things like that, that it's not lockstep just because we put it down in the strategy.
Sure.
If we evaluate and it says, hey, you know what, we need more time, then we have that understanding that we're going to take more time, it'll roll out a little slower or to different campuses and things like that. So appreciate that, but that really applies to the entire plan and all the strategies.
Well, and things can change. I mean, personnel can change, you know, just exterior pressures, you know, that aren't foreseen. Sure, yeah, I would not expect any less of y'all to do it that way. Let's see. I'm excited to hear about a, what is it, commit partnership with our marketing of our pre-K. That can you tell me just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, in fact, Dr. Horton, I'm going to invite her up. So we actually met with Commit, I would say, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, to talk about how we could partner with them to expand the awareness of pre-K, because we know that pre-K is important, but the problem is that we were trying to figure out how do we get more kids in the system. And so they were looking for a partner in the Tarrant County area, and they approached us, and we thought it was a natural marriage. And so we were trying to find a way to align our efforts with theirs so that we could, one, publicize, but then the other thing that's great about it is it's a network. It's a network of people that are involved, highly invested, specifically in 0 to 5. And how do you identify best practices and spread the word around those best practices and get them everywhere? So Dr. Horton's team has been working closely with Commit to articulate that in our system. So I'll let her share some of the details. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. As Dr. Work says, it's been an amazing year with Commit this past year. We have been able to meet with directors of early childhood learning for the last year, and we're sharing strategies around outreach, around marketing, around how we're supporting student learning in the classroom. And so one of the things that Commit came up with actually at the end of last year was this idea of having a joint marketing campaign. We did not enter into that last year, but they had some success with it. And so they wrapped back around to the districts, and they met actually Leslie, and her department has been a huge lever in this work. And so some of the departments or some of the districts that are part of this is Fort Worth ISD, Garland ISD, Richardson ISD, Irving, Grand Prairie, Dallas ISD. And what we're doing is we're leveraging our resources, and we're going to have a joint website. We're going to have a texting platform. We're going to be on TV with ads around the pre-K. We're going to be on the radio. And so we're really just expanding our bandwidth about the greatness that's happening here in Arlington ISD, and we're really excited about this upcoming partnership with them.
Well, this is such a critical age, and I know it's near and dear to your heart too, as it is mine, so I really appreciate that information. Thank you very much, and best of luck. On enhancing cultural awareness slide. The social emotional learning piece here, I just can't reinforce too strongly how important that is to everyone involved in the process. Kids, parents, teachers, principals, you know, it's all has impact. And helping develop emotional intelligence at the very youngest, with the very youngest, I think it is really critical. So I just wanted to say I'm really glad that that's, you know, part of the plan. And moving on to the next slide, the discipline. Enhancing cultural awareness, I think this is a great way to approach this. I really do. Good discipline is so important. Teachers can't do their job without, you know, support from everyone involved, support for good discipline. So kudos there, and hope it's very, very successful very quickly. And I think that's the end of my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walton. Ms. Mays.
Thank you, Dr. Rush. Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Appreciate the presentation that you've given.
As you were going through the different slides, I was thinking, okay, the beliefs, the vision, the goal, that sounds so familiar to me because we worked so hard to make sure that we put just the right words together, that we were all on the same page of the vision, and then you go into all of the ways to make all of that work. And I know as hard of work as it was just to put these few words together on paper, the amount of time it took us, I can just barely grasp the understanding of all the effort and all the work that's being put in to make sure that the strategic plan is realized the way that we intended when we started off with just the belief and the vision. So thank you very much to that. I think maybe one of my questions have been answered, but what I really wanted to know is, with all the educated words and the wonderful presentation that you put together, at the end of the day, just very simply, with the different layers of communication, are we making sure that nothing is lost in translation? For instance, cultural awareness, what that means to you as you try to teach what that may mean to your district leaders, then to your principals, then to the teachers. Are we making sure that there's no loss in communication of what we are actually trying to accomplish in implementing, and that the results will look the way that, once again, we're intending when we start at the very beginning?
I mean, that's a really good question. And honestly, it's a robust one, especially in a system this large, right?
Yeah.
We think about it all the time. I think one of the things that we recently learned, for example, from our assessment from Holdsworth, is that we really had to figure out ways to make sure that all of our communication cascades all the way down, right? Because it's natural in a system this large that you have to be cognizant of how you make that intentionally happen. So we're trying our best. That's what I can say. It's not perfect. Sometimes we're highly successful, and other times we've had to figure out like what happened, we missed something. But what we do try to do is put systems in place to make sure that we're monitoring the implementation of things with fidelity, and so we can identify when there's a gap and then figure out what the root cause of that gap actually exists. So one of the things we do, for example, when we look at student outcomes, is we try to figure out like what is the actual root cause for the why kids are doing well and what's causing them to not do well, and then how do we address it. We've actually recently even thought about gone through a root cause analysis around communication. You know, what is actually preventing teacher XYZ from hearing this XYZ message? What is preventing that from happening, and what can we do to fix that? So I think it kind of, the only way I could answer it the only way I can really answer it is back at the initial part of the presentation where I talked about continuous improvement. We are constantly in that cycle of thinking about what's working, what's not working, how can we make it better. We try to identify what's working well so we can replicate it, and then we try to acknowledge honestly and candidly when it's not going well and try to correct it.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. So with that being said, then my last question would then be, has anything that you've come across, or the district as a whole, that's been cost prohibitive, the budget parameters that we've put around being able to implement our strategic plan, is it still in place? Is there any changes that we need to make financially? And maybe that's a combination question for you and or
I can
Cindy.
speak to you about our approach. So Ms. Powell and I collaborate very closely in budget design. The process that we use initially, that I'll speak specifically for my team since it's the academic side, is we already start designing strategies for year 3 before we start attaching dollars to it. So if you were to go through our process with my team, what they would tell you is the first thing we ask them to do is gather with their teams to identify what strategies are coming up and what do the activities look like to make that happen, and then how do you attach money to that. And once those draft budgets are put together, then we look and see, we include things like the success that our kids are having or not having, and are there things that we should stop doing or doing. And we go through a review process with every director and every person that's on the academic side. We literally look line by line their budget, and we identify what's the difference between what's being requested this year and last year, what's the justification for it, and how is it going to impact kids, and we make choices. So I can honestly say for us that we've been able to live within the budgets that we push out every year. In fact, I can say in some cases we end up doing better than we actually projected, which is great because then money goes back to fund balance and we're being efficient. But we try to be really thoughtful about that. And frankly, we are really intentional about not having, there's no scientific word I can say, but lots of fluff.
Yeah.
We're really looking to say, what is the actual need that we have for our students? How much is it really going to cost? And how do we make that happen? The last thing I can say in terms of academic services, the philosophy that we function around is this money belongs to our students.
Right.
It doesn't belong to a department. So we share with each other when things come out. So like if Department XYZ has planned for something and we learn as we're going through the process through our continuous improvement review that we're going to discontinue something and there are funds sitting there that need to be repurposed somewhere else, we do it so that we can maximize our funding sources. And I'm very blessed to work with very collaborative people, both from finance department and from the academic services side, who are all really invested in each other's success. And so it makes for a very transparent process when we deal with the budget.
Good, good. Well, that's
Dr.
good.
Cavazos has a little bit of input there.
I would just add that, so I think two ways to look at that. Tonight, we're looking at the strategies that exist for this year, and last time we looked for last year and things like that. Big picture, and over 5 years in terms of finances, next board meeting, I won't preempt the FFC report, but next board meeting, FFC has spent a lot of time looking at a longer range and our challenges in terms of finances that includes a strategic plan and beyond. And so while Stephen's correct in terms of Cindy and Stephen work very closely together and they're very disciplined and it's highly appreciated because they really look at the strategies in terms of cost and things like that. The big picture is, as you'll hear next board meeting, there's some pretty serious financial challenges for this entire state, and that includes us as well. But in terms of what you're looking at tonight, they're very disciplined with the finances, which is very good. Next board meeting, we'll spend a lot of time on the big challenges, as you've heard some of them in the committee as well.
Okay, so we'll continue to say good job for tonight because we can at this point. But you kind of touched on what I was thinking about. If we're challenging the district to discontinue anything that does not seem to be efficient or is not working, then we want to make sure that there's nothing cost prohibitive that says if we scrap this right now, then we've got to find money to do something different. And we don't want to take away that opportunity to say, hey, we need to scrap this and we'll figure out how to do something better. So that was really my main point. So I appreciate the district being sensitive to that with the taxpayer dollars. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Mays, and to all my colleagues. Great questions, great presentation, and a mid-year check on our plan implementation. A lot of moving parts. It's quite tremendous, and similar to your iceberg analogy, to what Ms. Mays said, all the words at the top don't seem to be, I mean, they're a lot, but what was under that in the development is incredible. And it's the same thing here with the implementation of what those performance objectives are and all the other metrics that go into it and the implementation under that continuous improvement cycle. There's a lot under that, but that is under the surface. So one of the things I think that might help for everyone's understanding going forward as far as reporting is everything is in the context of continuous improvement, in context of that cycle. And I found myself having to constantly kind of think, okay, where is that in the process, everything that you brought up? And it might be helpful, it might not, to maybe highlight in each of these going forward, now here's the metrics, or here's our decisive action that we had to take as a result, just where it is in the process. And I say that because there's a few areas where I wrote down what did the metrics show, and of course being data-driven, that's I think what we're all looking at. For example, the instructional model implementation, we had the pilot program, and now we're in the phase 1, and I might be mistaken, but I don't know that we heard the outcomes, the metrics or the analytics on the success of the pilot program. So that's as an example. to Ms. May's point, and it kind of correlates with Mr. Hibbs on, are things getting lost in translation? Is there complete buy-in? Maybe looking at what those metrics are, or how it is articulated. I don't know if that would be through maybe surveying that's different than our overall staff survey that targets specifically those teachers that are going through that implementation process. I don't know. Have you thought about anything along those lines on how to help you analyze the successful buy-in and the successful implementation of it that is maybe a little bit more quantitative versus qualitative?
Yeah, it's essentially the process that I was explaining, where we have where we gather data specifically around how students are performing in the classroom who have access to being taught with the cycle versus those that don't. So there's a control group to see how students actually perform, to gather qualitative data from them, also quantifiable but qualitative data from the students themselves regarding their actual experience, and then asking teachers. So this, for example, this upcoming spring, we have design days that are coming together, where we can not only sit side by side with teachers and help them in their design, but also ask them about how it's going and solicit their feedback through questions, so that we can make sure we're designing supports along the way. Each teacher, like I said, has a one-on-one coach as well as principals, and so the facilitators of those groups provide us with weekly reports about how it's going and what's happening. We also have quantifiable numbers about the best practices that the teachers are actually trying to implement and the success rates they're actually having month to month. So there are multiple tools that we have. In terms of the spring, it was a very short pilot. It wasn't intended or designed to identify about student impact. We leaned into the research to tell us about that. It was more in terms of the feasibility of the actual system itself, meaning getting teachers' feet wet. What does it look like to be coached? What does the system look like? Asking for feedback along for implementation. What are some things that were challenging that we should think about when we bring on the larger group?
Gotcha.
That window only lasted about 8 weeks, so it was a short pilot. We have much more information over the course of phase 1 to redesign and think about phase 2, and leverage all these data points that I was just mentioning to help us do that. And I'm happy to bring some of those measures back when we come to the end of year review to show you specifically, like, this is what kids say, this is what teachers say. I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. It's phenomenal, the intelligent approach, as I've said previously in other meetings, that you and your staff have taken, and the rollout. Yeah, everything's about that rollout. And when mentioning that it took you all a year just to comprehend the one process, and then to engage the principals in that, and to keep them engaged and not have it lost in translation as they're putting it to their staff, it is huge.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the work. Thank you for the report. It's refreshing to see so many good things happening. Not that they don't always happen, but just this is the next level, just like with the Holdsworth process and the cultural tenets, the layers that we've taken such a long and deliberate approach on just what is that culture.
Right.
And now we're just above that to ready ourselves for the next phase. And it's just exciting to see what's coming. So thank you. I don't see any other lights? Anyone else? Then I'll say adieu. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda is the open forum for non-agenda items. I do not see any cards. So we will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Rice, and just a couple of information items that are highlighting in our district. First, our namesake, Jane Ellis, turned 100 this month, or last month actually. Many of you were able to attend, and former co-workers and students to celebrate her 100th birthday. So happy birthday to Miss Ellis. Next, the AISD Education Foundation was out awarding grants this week to much deserving teachers. They awarded more than $106,000 to 22 teachers to support their work in their classrooms and their grants effort. Again, can't thank the Education Foundation enough for their work in supporting our teachers. Just outstanding. Barnett Junior High celebrated 25th year anniversary last week with a ceremony and a program. The schools was honored several teachers, and you see them there, all who have taught at the school since it opened. And so our teacher, Sandra Smith, made these busts for them and presented to them that night. And they were very, very happy to have that. They also were very proud to have worked at Barnett for the whole time it's been open. So congratulations to Wellington Allen, Sarah Cagle, and Kimberly Geist, right, for their hard work. And one of them put them in their head. So, all right. Last Thursday, our counseling department, career tech department, and Arlington Chamber of Commerce partnered for the second annual Student Career Exploration Night. Event targeted 4th and 8th graders throughout the district to give them a chance to see what kind of careers are available upon graduation and in any of the 16 plus pathways. We had more than 750 people attend this event. And last year, it was not at the Career Tech Center, so this year it was, obviously, because we opened the Career Tech Center, and it was an outstanding event. And those 4th through 8th graders were really impacted by what they saw there, and all the teachers and the students that were there, plus the industry partners. I want to thank them too. They showed out in force, from Lockheed to Flex and Gate to our fire department to our police department, et cetera. So thank you to them. Finally, Area 7 and Area 8 Spelling Bee was yesterday, and congratulations to Area 7 winner, Jolene from Duff, runner-up Priyanka from Swift, and Area 8 winner, Haley from Shackelford, and runner-up was Nathania from Larson. And they spelled a good number of words, and they spelled them right. So they're our winners, and congratulations to them, and I had a chance to congratulate them and the parents as well, and they were very proud of their accomplishment, and we are too. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos, and yeah, congratulations to our students and all of those that participated in those spelling bees. I saw some of the words out on Facebook, on social media, and I didn't even know what they were, let alone how to spell them. And these, it's remarkable. That's right. Okay, let's see. Is it okay? Go ahead, Miss Walton. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Rush. I just wanted to give a very heartfelt thank you to the Arlington Council of PTAs who invited me to be with them today, this morning. There's a great deal of energy there. They are dedicated to benefiting our students and parents and teachers, and it's wonderful. Several of them were sporting T-shirts that said, not your mother's PTA. Well, folks, I'm the mother, you know, that they were referring to. And it's amazing, you know, I mean, because I was the mother of PTA, you know, 35 years ago. But they're still doing wonderful things. Council scholarships, the Reflections Cultural Arts Contest opportunities, and they're communicating in whole new different ways than we ever were able to back in the 80s and 90s. Website, Facebook, all of that sort of thing. And I think the key message I came away with, other than there's a lot of heart and a lot of liveliness in that group, was they were seriously talking about, you know, get informed and get registered and be sure to vote.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Walton. Ms. Mays?
Thank you. Along the lines of us talking about social and emotional learning, I wanted to take an opportunity, and I know that many of us have friends in the district, teachers, principals, staff members, and as a district we measure things based on the testing, based on their performance in the classroom. But there are so many phone calls that I've had, so many lunches, dinners, with so many teachers and staff members who are out there assisting and helping our students in ways outside of the classroom. I'm sure we could write a book of stories that we've heard, and then there'd be tons of other books of all the stories that we have not heard. So just want to be able to take the opportunity to say thank you to those teachers, to those staff members that are taking the phone calls from our students at night, that are talking to them about why it's important to want to continue to wake up the next day. All those things that we don't have an opportunity to measure, that they are putting into our students. I just want to just take the time to say thank you, because I hear it so often. And then also, with that being said, I'd like to send a congratulations to Coach Kelly Carruthers, the Bowie High School girls basketball coach, for having her 200th win on Tuesday night. Congratulations, Coach.
All right, fantastic. Well said, Ms. Mays. So I just wanted to read something related to Jane Ellis's birthday celebration. It was amazing being there. Of course, lots of AHS Colts and alumni and Ellis Elementary students singing, but Mac Martin read a quote, and you may have seen this on my Facebook post, but I just thought it was something to share with everybody in case you hadn't. She said that this in the Ellis Elementary 10-year anniversary, and it just really struck me because, and especially you'll realize what we were hearing tonight, it is so true today as it was then. She said the school is not the fine school it is because of the names across the door. Rather, it is a fine school because from the time the first footsteps crossed that open door, excellence in everything as it relates to children was the key word, and the attainment of excellence became the reason of being and doing. And that is what we're talking about with our strategic plan and everything related to excellence. Timeless words. So I just wanted to share that. Related to the Career Tech Center, Dr. Cavazos, that night was phenomenal. I was not in attendance, but I drove by as I was going to a TxDOT public input meeting on the Pioneer Parkway corridor in front, and our property obviously right there as Career Tech Center was impacted or could be impacted. But man, yeah, it was packed. It was absolutely packed. And I was thinking, gosh, there had to be at least 400 there. You're saying 750, it's incredible. With that said, I just want to make sure that everybody that's watching knows that on February 10th, we will be having the Career Tech Center dedication for the Career Tech Center in Dan Dipert. And that is at 10 a.m.? 10 a.m. So just to put that out there to the public, it's open to everybody. I believe it's going to be a standing room only event, but it's still important to put it out there to the community. So that's all I have. Madam Secretary, do we have any items to consider?
No, sir.
Oh, yeah. I didn't give you the mic. Thank you. All right. It is 9:12. We will not be going into closed session, so this meeting is adjourned.